Immortals is essentially a kind of balling on a budget roster. I mean, like it's like that fucking Macklemore song, thrift shop. It's like only got $20 in his pocket. Like he's at least about to try and do something with that. So the lineup for Immortals is Soaz in the top lane, Xmithy, Aika, Altec, and Hakuho as support. And so when you're looking at this roster, you're just like, well, okay, yeah, they have some firepower in a sense, but in another sense, it's like, well, where does the sheer aggressiveness come from? Where is someone absolutely going to destroy their lane, in essence, or jungle, right? And so you can't really find that on this team, and that's kind of the big problem that I have for it. So let's start at the top with Soaz. Now, all right, so I already talked about him recently in an article about being one of the best low econ top laners that's still currently playing today. And I still think that's true. I think Soaz is a very selfless player when it comes to just giving his other teammates resources and things. And you can see him throughout his career outplaying 1v2 situations when the lane swap meta happened. I mean, even being subbed out because he was the less aggressive player to Bwipo, right? And so he's developed this style into where he is like the thankless top laner. He does what he needs to do, and that can sometimes also mean that he needs to play aggressive in a sense as well. So as has that mindset, and now when you look at his misfits time, I largely don't count that. That's kind of a blip on the radar when you consider just the tenure of Soaz himself. He's had a very storied career, so one team I don't think sums up his entire capabilities as a top laner. And not only that, but Misfits was just a complete fuck up on every single measure imaginable, right? Of course, players underperforming, but also just team cohesion not working out, management fucking sucking dick. Like, it was just an all-around bad experience for that entire roster, right? They subbed in their entire academy squad in order to kind of bring back some wins, right? So stylistically, I think within this team, Soaz needs to show his other side in this roster. He needs to show that he is still capable of carrying a team and playing carries and playing up front and in your face. And I think he'll actually be able to do that within North America, because this is a place to where, yeah, sure, we do have a lot of very good top laners, but in terms of top laners that can actually play to a high defensive mode as well too, I really only think there's one, which is Impact. I think he plays it to a world-class level, but other than that, like, people are able to be punished severely when you go on the defensive, which then ends up turning out to be a great offense, right, as they say in football. So I think Soaz will actually perform quite well coming into this team, but I still would like to see a little bit more aggression from him in this current roster, and I hope that Immortals coaching staff recognizes that they do need to unlock Soaz to some extent when it comes to just a carry mindset. Xmithy, on the other hand, fantastic pickup. Like, although honestly, I think Svenskeren would be better within this roster, but maybe Svenskeren was just more expensive. I have no idea. But Xmithy, regardless, second best choice, of course. As I've always said, Xmithy is a really cerebral jungler, one of the most cerebral junglers within North America, more than Svenskeren too. But he just doesn't have a incredible aggression about him. And obviously, when Immortals were, spending all their money and shit, they spent it all on Xmithy and to a certain extent Hakuho and Soaz, right? So there was not much left to pick up on the other aspects of the roster. So Xmithy is still money well worth, or well spent, I guess. And So what I want to see though from Xmithy during this year is to basically revert back to the style of when he first joined Immortals way back in the day, right? And this was when Xmithy came fresh off of CLG and he kind of had to reinvent himself. It seemed like he just went through a period of reflection and was just like, okay, I really need to drastically make changes or else I'm not going to survive in this new team, right? So he definitely did change his style. He was playing Graves a shit ton and was super good on the champion and very aggressive with his counter jungling. And I'd like to see him do that within this roster because I think there is going to be needed some aggression from somewhere, right? And I think the most appropriate place would be from a veteran who knows what he's doing. So Xmithy, I hope to see that unlocked with him along with Soaz. I think they'll actually pair together quite well, and they'll just kind of be able to bounce ideas back and forth. And I think also that Xmithy will pair well with Hakuho, which I'll get to later. So Aika, I believe that's how his name is pronounced, is in the mid lane. Now, honestly, don't really know much about this player. I don't watch the national leagues in Europe, but he comes from Europe and he comes from the team LDLC. Now, I do know that LDLC is a very good team, and Yellow Star is actually the coach of this team. So you know that they have a decent amount of funding as a national team, and it's a team that has gone quite far within the national leagues, right? And he's played with the likes of Steelback, who, if you guys remember from the Fnatic days when he was the ADC, well, now he swapped to support. And then Joko is the jungler, and of course he is most famous for his time on Giants, and also Vitality was never that great of a jungler, but whatever. You get what you can get over in the national leagues. And so Aika coming into this, it kind of says a lot that this player was picked up ahead of Leader, who everyone was expecting. Leader, who is like this primarily assassin type pick champion player, and people are saying that his champion pool is the biggest limiting factor of him, but his skill is very high when it comes to those champions itself. So it's quite surprising that Aika would be picked over Leader. And especially as a side note, it's kind of funny that it's essentially mid laners would be criticized for their champion pool, and yet when a jungler gets picked, it's primarily because they were playing carry junglers in solo queue. People saw that they were fantastic at the carry junglers and carrying teams, and so therefore they are just like, yeah, fuck it, you only play Lee Sin, cool, like, yeah, come join our team. So it's kind of a little fucked up, but okay. Anyways, Aika's on the team. I think this is a pretty good pickup in the sense that you do need a rookie somewhere within the team so that you have an like exponential amount of growth over what you may have first considered in the first place when building a roster, right? There's like some X factor, and that could be your rookie, right? He could perform incredibly well. You get him at a low price. Obviously, this is a budget move too. So I think overall, this is a pretty good idea. And he also has experience with one of the most experienced amateur scenes and teams with LDLC. So I don't think it's as big of a jump from solo queue to a professional team. He's coming from a well-established amateur team over into the professional league. So I think this is actually a pretty intelligent move. Now, as for the bot lane, Altec and Hakuho. The problem that I have with this is that Altec, he was never impressive throughout his entire career as an ADC player. And I've, in some sense, thought of Altec as the budget Apollo, basically, right? It's like, yeah, Apollo he's decent at his role, but he's never going to break into the high ranks, I think. At this point, I think you can safely say that Apollo has peaked in terms of his capability as an ADC player. And I think that's the same with Altec, but to a lesser extent, right? So not only has he peaked, but he's peaked lower than Apollo. So it's kind of shocking that he's been given another chance, say, I don't know, over the likes of someone like Freeze, for instance. But I guess with the import rules and everything, it's also very difficult for an ADC player to be imported unless it is known that they are incredibly good, right? So you go with some homegrown talent like Altec to save some money. He wasn't picked up last year, obviously. So, yeah, you do save money, and this is just a budget move, essentially. And I'm not even going to say that he's a serviceable ADC. I hope to be proved wrong, but I just don't think he was ever that great as an ADC player throughout his entire history. I was never impressed by him. He would always play conservative. He'd never really play forward. Sometimes he would die in just random ass times or points in the game. He was never a great team fight ADC player, so there was really no positive about him. So it's my criticism for this bot lane, but how it kind of flips about is that Hakuho was very impressive last year, and he's a great support to pair with Xmithy, actually. I'm not going to say that he's that great of a pair with Altec because there's not a whole lot to work with. It might be that Hakuho will be able to unlock a little bit more out of Altec just because of how similar of a style he has with Apollo, but he's also even a less aggressive Apollo from the time that we did see Altec. I don't know, maybe he's changed. A lot can change over a year, so I'm willing to give a little bit of benefit of the doubt, but I just don't believe in this bot lane at all. But I do believe in this pairing of Hakuho and Xmithy because both of these are really intelligent jungler and also support. And not only that, but it's like Hakuho is great at roaming as well too. Like he's great at roam timings and he's great at doing the ward support of doing his homework essentially when it comes to planning wards throughout the map and timing that with his jungler. So, and he's also quite aggressive too when it comes to being able to initiate. So I think they'll just be able to bounce off each other quite a lot. And it's one of the better support jungler pairings I think that you could build. And I think that it's even better than what Svenskeren and Xmithy would be. So in some sense, you also make up the lack of having that aggressiveness from Svenskeren with having this better synergy pairing of Hakuho and Xmithy. So overall, I think this team composition looks decent. I don't think there's any catastrophic failures in terms of them building this roster other than maybe the rookie question mark. But even then, that's still kind of a measured risk that you can factor in and say, okay, this guy should at least perform decently middle of the pack, right? So a very measured team for sure, and with a rookie to develop. So I think that piece of the puzzle is quite great. Now, as for the points in which I think this team could go wrong is that Soaz and Xmithy basically need to go fucking primal on this motherfucker. Like one of them, at least one of them needs to be more aggressive than they were before. And so it doesn't matter who it is. Well, to some extent it does because you could have Ica be incredibly aggressive and Soaz be very aggressive, and that's kind of a mismatch. You don't want the entire top side of the map to be overly aggressive because then you just get more easily punished. But it would be better if Xmithy actually went back to his old days of IMT where he was aggressive and he did change his playstyle very significantly. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to see if Xmithy actually does become a fucking beast and kind of challenge Svenskeren in the last category that he is needed to challenge him in. Now, as far as the entire team composition, other than that, don't rely on this bot lane at all. It's just, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I don't think investing into Altec as a carry is going to go anywhere. And I think if he can prove that they themselves in the 2v2 can get an advantage, then yeah, go ahead. Give them some resources, some games. But until that actually happens, don't invest shit at the bot side of the map. And I think other teams are going to realize that you aren't going to invest at the bot side of the map either, because it's not worth it. So it's going to be like an uphill battle for Immortals essentially, and that they need to think about their entire game plan and how they want to strategize their mid, jungle, and top synergy, because it's going to be very difficult. And maybe Hakuho needs to roam a little bit more than he has normally done, which is to say quite a lot, because he was still a decently heavily roaming support. So we'll see what goes on, but I have Immortals kind of at the middle of the pack. Maybe they could break into fourth, but other than that, I don't think that they reach any higher. So here's to Immortals, trying to break expectations. Maybe Ica popping off, and maybe Xmithy or Soaz popping off. But other than that, I don't really have any big expectations for this Immortals roster.